Okay, so I have your chapter 6 stuff from the review book. Kind of had to wing it. And I talked to you about this. Some of you don't have this. Are you going on this? If some of you don't have it quite done, you can turn it by Monday or Tuesday. I'm sorry I was gone. It was unplanned. 2.5 years, I finally got COVID. Took a long time. Take your to pass it back. I didn't mark it. You did it. You didn't get it. Good. So if you didn't quite finish part of it, I'll give you. I checked that I got it in, but I'll give you full credit. I'll give you very easy points for this. Sorry about that. You only have to kind of wing it when I'm gone. And funny thing about this is that I've got COVID. I was in Missoula scene. We're doing a couple things here with my wife and I, and we're going to go see a friend of mine. And he's immunocompromised very severely. And so I was going to do a test, and we're going to do stuff outside. And I just tested because I'm going to see my friend and going to be very careful. I did say I have a little bit of a stuffy nose, but it was really wet and humid. I just didn't know. So did the antigen test, it's on my nose, put it in, and you have the baseline and then the other lines. Who's done the at-home test? A lot of people have, and I've done so many of them. The first line came up. Normally, that's what happens. I put that little Q-tip in and put in. Literally 30 seconds later, the line came up saying that I was sick. Like immediately, boom, there it was. You've got to be kidding. I look at it. And so I did get a little bit sicker, but not too bad. But I didn't start testing test negative until yesterday. And if I test negative tomorrow, I don't have to wear the mask, supposedly, but it is going on. I did catch it here without a doubt. It is going around. And almost everyone seems to have had it. My first, but I've had it, so I did the vaccines and the boosters. So that's why I didn't get too sick. But so you know, it's going around again because we're all packed in here. We had watched Thomas Jefferson movie. I'll let you in parts of that, but fortunately, that's one of the things after years of training, I had that all ready to go for 2 days. And then I made this thing Sunday night for chapter 6. And so I knew I was going to be gone on Wednesday. I knew I had that set there. It's not complete. My plan is to give you a newer version of that review book to check it out in about 2 weeks. But I didn't have time to do it. It's generic. It has basic facts. But it's still pretty darn good. It has a lot of information. Who's ever do the multiple choice? Anyone? How'd you do? Good. Those are the style they ask. They give you those stimulus and those basic questions. The stimulus is trigger memory. That's the big reason for the question. We'll do more of this. And the thing is, if you can do a plain multiple choice, you have stimulus, it becomes hopeful. That's the way it is with everything. And so I made this up, and then on Thursday, I actually felt 1,000% better. But on Wednesday, I thought it wouldn't be a good look catching COVID and hacking on everybody, even though I was wearing a mask. And so I had that Washington. I really liked Hamilton and Jefferson, man, and state. And with a special, that's a little bit too much for you. How they disappeared and vanished and flowed. I think it does a good job. It's goofy. It's supposed to be. That's what I really like that one. But which one of the two was for a more strict interpretation of the Constitution? They said. And then what did Jefferson do as soon as he was president? And what?
Disregarded an act because of that.
The term is pragmatic. But yeah, you're exactly right. And the thing about it is you'll find this out a lot. A lot. Who's ever out of power is going to say they want a strict interpretation of the Constitution. You're abusing your powers. And then what happens as soon as they're in power? They might abuse or might not, but it just reverses. So Jefferson is gonna say, and we're gonna read them. And you get the same thing with this document in the back. They are saying something. They may not be totally sincere. They have a political reason. Hamilton or Federalist number 10. This isn't necessarily what Madison believed. Madison wanted the elite of New York to ratify the Constitution. Who needs this from yesterday? Brian, you were yesterday. You were yesterday. I think it's. Everyone else? He said, no political parties, all the elite will come together because we're all buddies. He was trying to convince the elite of New York to ratify the Constitution. We don't know if he actually meant that. He probably did. I think Madison believed everyone was going to be like him. He's the smartest person ever, so they'll do what he wanted. That's what he wanted. They'll all follow me. And that's what's best for the country. So that's why I want you to read this. If you did, I think everyone got it done pretty much, didn't they? Or did it? No, wait, we didn't get it done. There's a few of you did not get it done. Okay. You still have one question left. Everyone else not get it done. And I know this is the thing I like to show when I talk about the and then kind of stop and joke around about the special effects and the overacting, which I enjoy too immensely. But if you didn't get that, just get it to me. And I'll get this graded as soon as I can. The test. I know I was gone. I told you if you got 5 or more points wrong on a short ID, you could redo it. And so if I got some, like I got yours and a couple others, I think you turned yours in. So I'll look at it and change anything on that. And I'm typing grades, but if you were going to do a revision and didn't turn it because we had a sub, I'll give you till Monday to do the revision. I know it's all awkward and weird, but I'll get yours. Look at it. Okay. I'll get yours. Anybody else have it? All righty then. Hopefully I test negative tomorrow. I'm just asking. Even though, let's see. Okay, so there's a couple notes we got to get, and also fill the blanks on the chapter 6. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll go through this I'm going to go through this really fast. You probably pretty good, but if there's any notes you have to add, you can add to it. I'm just going to go through a few things really quick on that because chapter 6 tells you the basics, but there's a couple things we have to get. So did we get this?
Yes. Barriers.
So we got barriers. Okay, good. So we got barriers, Shays Rebellion. That's one thing that really important. Shays Rebellion led to the Constitutional Convention. The fear of too much democracy, the mob taking over. So let's go through this quick. I'm going to go. So the Annapolis Convention, they actually met at Mount Vernon, Washington's home. But people wanted stronger government for interstate and international commerce. They want to protect, though, their wealth. This is the elite. They were fearful of too much democracy. The bondholders wanted their money back. All these kind of things happened. So they had met. This was ad hoc, meaning it was not official. It was not standard. They're meeting in private. These are very, very wealthy people. Many of these so-called founding fathers who are fearful they were losing their power because more average people, AKA the mob, were gaining too much power. And so that is why 1787, what we call today the Constitutional Convention, Philadelphia Independence Hall. One thing I didn't notice on the little thing in notes. Some of you already have this, so you just make sure you do. I give you no space at all. I didn't realize how little space I gave, so literally I was setting up, I was clipping it for the guest teacher, which by the way, he did a very good job. And thank you for being good to him. I know you guys are pretty rough. And the whole stated mandate was to strengthen the articles. And they immediately decided to throw the old articles out and write a new thing. Almost immediate. Throw it out. And a bunch of them went home. Only 55 people were left. So you can imagine these 55, almost all elite, most were bondholders, many of them were slaveholders. But they had, as they saw, a vested interest to keep power in the hands of the elite. They thought we're losing power. So, a couple more things just to make sure we got about the convention. It's going to be in secret. They claimed so they could be impartial. But the real reason was, hey, you get a group of people, like-minded people, who violate the law, which they did because they're throwing out the old Constitution, replace the old articles, replace them with a new document that will benefit themselves. So they're throwing out the government, breaking the law, creating a new government for themselves. That, by definition, is treason. They were terrified that they would be accused of treason, which is so funny. You think about the writers of the Constitution, worried about treason. And there were people who called them that. What are you doing in there? Why are you doing this? This is a picture I took. Little Jeremy, who was bugging me, was right about here. And slavery, what do we do about slavery? We'll wait. Don't talk about it. This was already so divisive. What restrictions do we put on it? What protections do we put on it? You'll see this in every legislature. They kick the main issues to the end of the session. Montana's did you know Helena's the capital of Montana? Did you know that? Pretty exciting, huh? Montana meets biannually. Their legislature, so every 2 years. They'll meet again in January. They meet for a few months. And all the really important issues they'll do in the last 2 days. And they'll debate and all this stuff, but the really big ones, like the budget at the end. And what do they get at the end then? Some weird compromise that pleases nobody. It's not going to be like a divine document written by the greatest minds. It's just what can we get past? That's what's going to happen here. The federal government will be supreme, though. They all agree to that. And they also agree no democracy. When they mean democracy, they mean regular people having a greater voice. That could be both political and economic. But remember what Madison said in Federalist number 10. He thought factions would evolve in a democracy. Factions, which are political parties. And the biggest issue that would be for factions, property. One, rich party versus poor party. That didn't quite ever happen, but in small degrees. So, big state plan. So I have the big state plan, Northern Virginia plan on there. Who's the author of the big state plan? Anyone get that down? Anyone get that? Yeah, Madison. So Madison was the author, and that's why he's considered the father of the Constitution, just like Jefferson's the author of the Declaration of Independence. No, Jefferson wasn't the sole author. Madison wasn't the sole father. Madison, his close friend was Jefferson, and they too were very much alike, elite plantation owners. Jefferson was nearly a foot taller than Madison, but other than that, they're pretty much alike. So, a couple things real quick. Bicameral, meaning 2 houses. Parliament had 2 houses, House of Commons, House of Lords. And they both must agree on a bill before it to become a law. So that's what he wanted, a lower house and upper house. Why? So it's really hard to pass a law. He wanted it to be difficult to pass a law. It's really hard to pass a law through two houses. It's impossible now, virtually. Both would be apportioned by population. So we got that population, that's why it's a big. We get all that in your little, this could also be in the Virginia plan. You might already have that down, so this might be reviewed, but I just wanted to make sure we got it. I put a line through it because that's not what happened. Even though this is the template for the United States Constitution, that didn't happen. And lower house by voters. This would be the only part of it, of the entire government that voters would have a voice in. And there would be an executive. The executive would be chosen by the lower house. That didn't happen. Remember, even though a vestige of this remains in the US Constitution, if nobody wins a majority in electoral college, it goes to the House. So, strong central government, government supreme. The other plan, New Jersey. Did anyone get how many houses this is going to have? Unicameral, one. So the United States, it is the law, it's constitutional that every state has to have a Republican form of government. 49 states have a bicameral system, Montana included. Montana has House and the Senate. Only one state has a unicameral. Anybody want to guess who it is? The most obvious choice, Nebraska. You were all thinking that, right? It's the Cornhusker state. They have no choice but to have, it's kind of one of those weird quirks. And there's no parties in Nebraska, technically. It's all nonpartisan, even though they immediately divide up into parties, the two parties. Equal representation by state, so it's basically the articles within an executive. So New Jersey was the closest to actually following the mandate. Those are the two plans. Pretty basic. What came out of this? The Great Compromise, and that'd be the first of the big compromise. The Great Compromise. I think I have that on there. Don't I have Great Compromise for Connecticut plans? Awesome, good. Roger Sherman, one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence. Now, this is another example. This was not an idea of great elite, learned people coming together and forging the best system that would meet the needs of all the people of the United States. No, this was a last minute forced through compromise. They knew it was happening, jerry-rigged together to fit. They knew it had problems, but it could pass. So I got to be very clear about this. This was not like a divine document from the mountaintops. This was a compromise they just threw together. Nobody really liked it. Bicameral, House of Representatives, right? So we got that probably. House of Representatives be first one. That is by population. So you might already have that from your chapter 6 notes already. But how? So they have a census every 10 years and they apportion that way. Originally, what was it? Every 60,000 people, and then eventually they would cut it off at 435. 100 years ago, they cut it off at 435 members. And even though the population is 3 times greater, today, we still have 435 members of the House. So every 10 years, there's an apportionment committee, and they divvy up those 435 members to all the 50 states. Every state must have at least 1. And that is why in 2021, when they were going over the 2020 census, they gave Montana 1 more. Because Montana's population went up. A lot of places went up in population. But they said Montana, they gave an additional seat. I should add, Montana used to have the largest legislative district, and now we have 2 of the smallest. So we kind of went from, we are really small. Voters decide it every 2 years. Who can vote? According to the Constitution when it was written, it doesn't say. The states decide who can vote. Most states, it was what kind of people could vote. What in what? Yeah, landowners, some kind of property, or if they pay taxes like they have money. Exactly right. Now, some states, like Pennsylvania, were getting close to universal white male suffrage. And a lot of the northern states allowed anybody with property. So women could vote if they have property, same thing. That right is going to be taken away. Rights are sometimes taken away. We'll get to that down the road. And today, who can vote according to the Constitution? It doesn't really say. All it says is who can be denied the vote. There is no constitutional right to vote to this day. Nowhere in the Constitution says that you have a right to vote. Now, it says that states can't deprive 18-year-olds, or states can't deprive women, or states can't deprive people based upon color or skin or national origin, or language or ethnic group or religion. But it doesn't say you have a right. No. That is what we call a loophole in the Constitution. So that is why every state has different requirements on something called registration, which would be created at the end of the 19th century, about where people can vote, what time they can vote, when they can vote. The states decide all that. And even if you vote, do they have to count it? No. They throw away millions of votes every election. So there's no constitutional right to vote. And most people are kind of surprised by that. They assume they have a right. Nowhere does it say. That's a big loophole. Oh, tax bills got to start there. So, oh, money bills start there. What does that mean? Not much, but that's a legacy from Parliament. The Senate, here's the compromise, 2 per state. State assemblies would decide for a 6-year term, so the election would be in the state assemblies. But the 17th Amendment in 1913 changed that to the voters of the states. And that's the way it is today. This was seen as a massive liberal reform, even though it's only 2 per state. So what it means is every 2 years there's an election for all 435 members of the House and 1/3 of the Senate each 2 years. So we're coming up to a midterm election. All the members of the House and 1/3 of the Senate. No senators from Montana coming up this year. Every 4 years is a presidential election. That's why they call this a midterm. It's presidential 2024. Nobody else has terms like this, really. They have a system where the government collapses, they call a new election. We are set on terms. That's both good and best. And an executive. Who picks the executive? They still pick them today. Yeah, electors. Electors chosen by the state, they must get a majority. If they don't get a majority, if no one gets a majority, it goes to the House. 4-year terms. How many terms can a president serve when the Constitution was written? Many as they will. The Constitution will be amended after World War II. All Republicans and conservative Democrats unified to make to pass this. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, person who kind of coined the term liberal, but as we know it politically, he'd be elected for 4 terms. So now it's 2. The majority of electors. Every elector gets 2 votes, by the way. 2 votes. Whoever gets the majority becomes president. The second most votes become what? Yeah, that's what happened in 1796. Adams became president, and the second most votes was Jefferson, his political opponent. When they wrote it, the assumption was, well, let me rephrase that. They just were getting something done. to appease the states. They did not want democracy. They didn't want the people to vote for president. The states didn't want the House. They went to the state assemblies. But they justified it by saying, we have all the elite, they'll be alike-minded. The elites will all think alike. They'll be the best of the best. So the best of the best will pick the very best to be president. And it doesn't make sense then that number 2 would be vice president because they'd all be unified. Madison would be one of the first to realize all the elite don't necessarily agree. And what party would Madison become the leader of, even though he said in Federalist number 10, there were no parties. What was his party? You remember that, name of that party. In the book, they gave it 2 names. It's called the Democratic Republicans, but everyone called them the Republicans. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, Monday. Majority of 4. Who chooses the electors? State assemblies. Now that's what the Constitution says. What it meant was, if the state assembly would go through their ratification process and put it in their constitution. So that's what they meant. They did not mean that the state assemblies would supersede the Constitution. I'm saying that because there's a case in the Supreme Court. It's literally being debated right now to say that state assemblies can throw out the will of the voters and pick them to electoral college. And if that happens, everything you know will change. We have an entirely different country. And it's going to be something, I don't know where it's going to go. It's right now happening. And there's a very good chance it could happen. And what you think you know about the country will change. Big deal. Obviously, I can only tell you that right now. Pay attention. If you didn't know that, you will be surprised. And electors are the members of Congress per state. Per state. So Montana in 2020 had 2 members of the Senate and 1 member of the House, thus 3. California in 2020 had 53 members of the House and 2 members of the Senate, 55 electors. Now, state assemblies chose, state assemblies literally voted on electors for each state. But beginning in the 1830s, they started letting voters choose the electors in each state. Literally a slate of electors. These electors would be chosen by the parties. Everyone got that? So this is what we got to write down here. Today, the voters pick the electors. So when I, so many years ago, voted in my first presidential election, so it was, what year was it? 1908, William Howard Taft running against William Gettysburg. And I was running in that election. You remember that, right? 1908? I just turned 22, and the voting age of Montana was 21. Some states are still 24, some states are 29. Times were a lot different back in 1908. Vitamin C, that's my recipe for 2 to 3 pounds of vitamin C. That's all I use. So let's go to more recent. 2020. When I went in and voted for president in 2020, I didn't vote for, let's say, the 2 main candidates, the Republican President Trump or the Democrat Vice President Biden. Because once you're president or vice president, you're still technically that time. I didn't vote for them. I voted for electors pledged for Trump or pledged for Biden. Now, on my ballot, it said the president, vice president, and so on. It said their names. Some states, they still list out the electors. They still list out names. The Republicans chose 3 electors for Trump. The Democrats chose 3 electors for Biden. And then this is what you have to get done. Voters choose it, and it's winner take all. And whoever wins the state election for those 3 electors in Montana, it's all 3. Who won in Montana 2020? Trump won in 2020, got all three. Biden won California and got all 55. It's winner take all. Everyone got them? Winner take all. So we don't have a presidential election nationwide. It's in each individual state. And then they come together to the Electoral College. So the popular vote doesn't matter except for picking the electors, unless they change it, unless the Supreme Court rules and wow, the Constitution. But what does that mean? Who does it favor? This system, the Great Compromise, greatly favors small states. Greatly. Every state, regardless of its size, has 2 seats. So think about Montana. Its population is less than 1/45 the population of California. Yet Montana has the same number of senators. Montana is almost twice the population as Wyoming. Yet Wyoming has 2 senators. There are 2 Dakotas. And they have 4 senators. Both of them smaller than Montana. I would argue, who's with me? There should be no Dakotas, right? That's states. Big states are really underrepresented per citizen in the Senate. Great. They knew it. The thing that happened though is urban areas are getting bigger and more concentrated. And so that means there are less people in rural states, just simply there are. It's just how the rural states. And so urban areas are really getting hit by this. Yeah. Good question. Let me get to the Electoral College. I'll explain right here in a second. So in the Electoral College, therefore, small states have a big advantage. Montana, if every person eligible to vote in Montana voted, that'd still be 500,000 votes. And yet we have 3 electoral votes. 30 million eligible in California. And also think about what that happens. Let's say in a state like California, 40% of the population there in 2016, it was only like 37% in 2020, voted for Trump. And their votes are meaningless. Gone. Gone. They don't mean anything. In Texas, 47% of the population voted for Clinton. And their votes are meaningless. And so that means people in these states, their vote doesn't count, really. Montana, I mean, think about it. You voted for Biden in 2020, your vote didn't count. Or for that matter, Hawaii, you voted for Trump, your vote didn't count. Because they were going to vote for Biden anyways. So that's something else that happened. Maine and Nebraska were 2 exceptions. They also let each legislative district vote. And whoever wins the legislative district gets that electoral vote. So it's a little bit more small d Democratic. So they split and one of the votes went for Trump in Maine. Same thing happened in 2020 in Nebraska. Nebraska had this, and the legislative district that's basically Omaha, they voted for Biden. Nebraska's getting rid of it. So that would be winner take all Nebraska. They're apportioned by the state. And so Montana just did theirs. We want to portion it. So Helena's in the western list.
So is there like, is this the amount of
Population, they try to divide it by population. So they're both the same size population. So sometimes they'll cut right in the middle of the counties. The counties have no effect on the legislative district. Or states. No, ours are winner take all.
but because one district in
They got small.
only one district?
Well, no, they have 2. One voted for Biden, one voted for Clinton, one voted for.
But then we have 2 registered districts. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what I was asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So with that, one more thing I should add. So Trump did win the electoral college. And this is 2016. I'm showing this one because it kind of shows how this could become an issue. And it looks like, oh, the red state, blue state, I should add where that came from. This is an artifact of the 1980, or sorry, 2000, the 2000 presidential election. When they had color TV, and there were three, starting in the late 60s, there were three television networks, and they all agreed if they're going to designate who won each state the electoral votes, they give it a color, and they would alternate. So they would go Democrats red, Republicans blue, and then alternate. They'd switch. So in 1996, the Democrats were red, the Republicans were blue. 2000, the Democrats were blue, the Republicans were red. That election was so contentious, especially over contested votes in Florida. And they kept showing the map, blue states for Al Gore, the Democratic vice president, red states for George W. Bush, the Republican governor of California. They kept showing it, they started saying red state, blue state, and now it's stuck. It kind of irritates me because things are actually much more complex than simply saying something's a red state or a blue state. But that's where it came from. It has no deep intermeaning, except that just happened to be the way the television networks were in 2000. So here are by counties. And boy, if you just look by area, President Trump won almost all these counties. Then he was still just Donald Trump, not going to be president-elect. But if you size the counties by population, see this blue counties right in New York, or blue counties here? Look what happens when you go by population. So many more people live in just these urban areas. That other map, they kind of both distort. This is the way the election actually turned out. 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton, who was former Secretary of State, former senator. And then over 10 million voters did not vote for the president, but that doesn't matter. All that matters are individual elections in individual states. The overall popular vote is irrelevant. Remember what I told you. They did not want a democracy. And so that is our constitutional form of government. And so President Trump in 2020, if about 70,000 votes would have been different in certain states, he would have been reelected. Yet Joe Biden got over 7.5 million more votes nationwide. And so that tells you about the situation they've allowed us to be in, where you could have something like that. In 2000, yeah.
Like what the party saw.
There's Libertarian, there's the People's Party, there's the Green Party. Oh, this should tell you why there's only two parties. It's winner take all. Every country that has winner take all has two parties. One party on one side. And that's why we have this weird conglomeration, especially the Democrats are really kind of all over the place because we only have two parties and we have a very vast population. But if it's winner take all, a third party takes away votes from one of the other two candidates. And so it's very difficult to vote for a third party because in many ways, it's like you're wasting a vote. But if you voted for the Libertarian or the Green Party, you know you're not going to win. If we have proportional representation, like let's say Germany or Italy, then you have more political parties. Whereas then again, you might have Italy where you have the leading party has about 28% of the vote, and they're running the government. It's fascist. And the fascist party's back in Italy. It should make us all sleep well at night. My little 9-year-old nephew sent me a very terrifying note about that. He's very scared of fascists. He lives in Italy. I'm going to be honest. I'm biased against fascism. I don't like Nazism either. I'm going to let my biases show for that. I don't like slavery either. If you're curious, I'm probably not going to present a good side of slavery. So you know. So with that, let's jump right. This is what it looks like today. That's how the Electoral College works. So what this means is somebody could be elected for president and only be on the ballot in 8 states. And not be on the ballot in any other state. In fact, they can win those 8 states by 1 vote each. So they win by a total of 8 votes and not get another vote any place in the country and be elected president. So that is the Electoral College. And it was designed, if anybody says it was to protect slavery, that's not why they did it. It's not what they were thinking. Did it help protect slavery down the road? Yes. Gotta be clear about it. But that wasn't the plan. All right. Okay, 3/5 compromise, we have that. I think we already have, no, let's do this really quick. 3/5. So, there were 2 issues. The book only covered representation, but it's also taxation. They never really covered that in full detail. Let's make sure we get this for both. This is the argument. You notice I did not add one very important word there. The debate was not about slavery. This was not a debate for or against slavery. Yes, slavery is an underlying issue, but this is not about slavery. Just like people, I've heard people say the Electoral College was about slavery, or people say the Senate was about slavery. No. Yes, it's going to help slavery, but that's not why they did it. So what they thought was representation, if you count slaves towards representation, that means towards population there, that means more members of the House and Electoral College. They also thought they were going to divvy up taxation. The greater your population, more taxes. You count slaves, more taxes states like Virginia pay. Well, you can imagine how the sectional divide immediately is going to happen. Northern states want slaves counted for taxation. They want Virginia to pay more in taxes. Southern states want Virginia to have more members of the House. New York does not want this. Now, there were slaves up here, but not as many. So once again, this is not a compromise where they got together, let's find the best solution. They just, what will we accept? What will Northerners accept for representation? What will Southerners accept for taxation? And they came up, one slave will be counted as 3/5 of a person, or as they said in the Constitution, for every 100 slaves, they actually don't use the word slaves. They use people in conditions of servitude. They don't want to use the word slavery. 100 counts as 60. Why? Half was not enough. Yeah, I know. It's just, they just came up with this. Now, they're not saying that they're not like a full person, but remember, this is just for counting population. This does not mean anything else other than counting people towards population. So I'm going to add this. And you notice I put in all caps. Slaves, they have no rights as citizens. Slaves cannot vote. Do not write down that this gave more power to slaves, or slaves would have 3/5 of a vote. Somebody will do this. One of you will do it. Look around at your classes. One of you will do it. Which one? Which one? Slaves aren't citizens. Remember, most states, especially in the South, it was all only white men with a lot of property could vote. But that means white men with property who could vote are going to have a greater voice in the representation in the House because of this. That's what it means. So with that, who did a favor? Well, did this happen? They never did taxation like this. They never did it. And so the South, where there's more slaves, will be held. And they literally called this slave power. Why slave power? Not because the slaves have more power, but because the slave owners. More members of the House, and just as important, more members of the Electoral College. So laws like the Missouri Compromise in 1820 could not have been passed without slave power. And when it says the extension of slave power, and you'll see this written time after time in the 1840s, 1850s by Northerners, they're talking about the 3/5 compromise. There's a certain man who was elected president that if they didn't have the 3/5 compromise, didn't count slaves as citizens. As horrific as that sounds, if they said you're a slave, you're not a citizen, Thomas Jefferson would never have been elected president. Who knows what would have happened then as you sit in what's going to become the Louisiana Purchase. So, kind of a big deal. But slavery was never the issue. Yet slavery was underlying everything. So, see all these people? What do they all have in common? There's two things they have in common. Well, three things. They're all bipeds. What else? Huh? And what position did they have? Everyone was present. All slaves. We can find good and bad things about each one, especially opposed to slavery, completely immorally opposed to slavery. His father-in-law gave him a slave. He didn't know what to do. He found it free. He misses us from it. So we have what's called a complex history. And I would argue you find good and bad things about it. Nothing is black and white. There are a lot of shades of gray in this country, which is actually much more interesting. And therefore, I always called this the slave trade compromise. When I was a youth growing up, this was a slave trade compromise. But you'll see it more and more in the book called The Commercial. So I think I wrote it as the commercial, didn't I? Because that kind of fit in there, but it's also the commerce. So can commerce regulate trade? But what can they regulate the slave trade? Compromise, mountain valleys. Everything will evolve around mountain valleys and what they can do in these valleys and what would that. Okay. Congress can regulate trade, commerce, and the slave trade will be left alone for 20 years. Madison would write in his notes that pernicious institution will go away in about 20 years. No more slavery, everything will be fine. Was he correct? He called it a pernicious institution. Pernicious means evil. Once again, if anybody believed they didn't know slavery was wrong, then they are misinformed or lying to you if they say that. They knew it was wrong. And as it would turn out, 20 years after this, when Congress could regulate the slave trade, they would ban the international slave trade, the United States. We would no longer take slave or kidnapped free people from other countries. Don't still take slaves. It's complex. So those are the three compromises. Really quick, last thing. Did I put separation of powers on? Yeah, the book didn't do a good job, so I wanted to make sure I got this. Separation of powers. The Baron de Montesquieu, some of you might have heard Montesquieu, he wrote during the reign of Louis XV in France that of all the powers in the hand of one person, the king, you have abuses. There are three basic groups: the executive, they interpret, carry out the laws; judicial, rule on legality of laws; legislative, create the laws. They must be separate and not be in the hands of the same person. And Madison greatly admired Montesquieu, even though Montesquieu was writing about France, he saw it as just like the king, even though that wasn't quite what the king was. And so there's Montesquieu on all these pictures. You see a lot of pictures of Montesquieu. They all show him like a Roman senator. In fact, Washington adored the Roman Republic, and that's why the Senate is called the Senate for George Washington. So, what are these separation of powers? These powers are going to be, and I forgot a quote, but they're going to give a term will be developed called checks and balances. Each branch will have an ability to check the power of the other branches and make sure one branch won't get too powerful. It's not an absolute check, and it does not mean the three branches are going to be equal. Now, what I want you to do is this. We're going to make a little triangular thing. I'm not going to put all the powers down, but executive, legislative, and judicial. We're going to do it really fast Monday when school begins. But put executive, legislative, judicial. We'll put down a couple of the powers and the checks just to give you an idea what it was. But the whole point they had is that Madison is thinking not too much power in the hands of one. I should ask, where would there be power? They all knew the power is going to be in the executive. The executive is gonna have immense power, and that was the branch they were most fearful. Everyone jot this down, leave a little bit of room, we'll put down a couple things really quick. Article 2, Article 1, Article 3. And that's where we pick. Really fast tomorrow. Really fast. So fast tomorrow you won't even see it, but I'll save it till Monday. I'm all messed up. Missing 4 days is hard. Oh, I should add one more time. Thank you for being so polite to the guest teacher. Really appreciate it. Hold on to it. I'll put them all together. You got it done. Let's see, and I know some people get right faster than others. It's like this. And I'll take away 2 points. So I'll take away 2 points for you, ready? 2 points for you. Yes. Probably be really important. I'll give you 2 more points. Yeah, if I make a mistake on your point, please let me know. But that was purely my bad.
Actually, Mr. Parcher, because I was about to tell you that too on something.
No!
You still have my test?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to see something, because I know I got the bonus question wrong. Oh, that works. Right, so it should be.
Five, and then September. But if you got the next 5 years. And the one you missed, I mean, I know 9 out of 10 times. Right?
Yeah.
And that's why I gave you the chance to redo those. Oh, see?
They didn't like that I kept coughing. I'm like, fine, I'll put a mask on and stop putting your sweatshirts over your mouth. That's it.
On their face.
I have a cold. I want my cold.
Monday.
Stuff every day. You're not relying on anything. All driven by what you know. Like, so we're all at the same point right now, Ross and I are, but like, one of us gets sick. Days we have, like, and we all get out of whack. Concepts. Something like stay quarantine. I had it. So I was like, status, and then just. That way.
Don't give me that. What are you talking about? Did you like the movie? And the overacting.
You know.
Watch the. Why do you want to do this? What do you think my signature would have any? By the way, I had COVID. I'm tested negative. I had to wear a cast when we're done.
Okay.
So you're just having people sign this?
So basically, if I get permission from all of the teachers, then no one can stop me, right?
Well, since that is irrelevant, I'm gonna sign up Warren G. Harding. There.
Really?
It's as irrelevant as anything. I signed it.
Hey, but I have to have like your proof that you signed it,
Huh?
not Warren.
Warren G. Harding. Good. Pam Harding.